about today, right?
I am, and I think it's a little ironic because I am on a real journey in figuring out what self-love means to me. I also lean into Laura and Megan all the time to teach me what I need to know about inner love and myself and all that kind of stuff. So for me to introduce this, when Megan said that, I was like, oh, I don't know anything about it. Y'all need to introduce it. So I've thought about it. Of course, I know what self-love is. And I think a lot of us hear that and say, oh, I'm going to get a massage. I have lived in a space, I'm realizing, with an unregulated nervous system for a long time. And in the last few months, I've found a space that has allowed me to have a regulated nervous system. And so this concept of self-love has now changed drastically because you guys, I would choose sitting in a safe, peaceful space over a Grove Park massage all day long. I think they're both self-love, but I think it's two very different conversations. Old me would have said, get my hair blown out, whatever. New me is like, give me a coloring book and no sound and just let me be. And so I want this to be collaborative, of course. And I really want to talk about the true inner self-love because we all can externally self-love, buy some new clothes, whatever. But my hope is that this conversation really has some depth. And I believe with Megan and Laura, it's likely to go that way. So I don't know. That was kind of an all over introduction.
Love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I think you've nailed it in like what we really want to talk about here is not the external validation of love, right? Like looking at how we might buy in or escape to something that we call, self-love, like you said, spa treatments or self-care, right? Like we kind of talked about that, I think last month, or I don't know what we were recently talking about the difference between like self-care and self-love are two different things, right? First of all. And we're sold a lot of times this need to go outside of ourselves to find that love in some kind of way. But really, self-love is the center of all of our ability to move through the world with, and this is something that Megan and I talk about a lot. It's like it's the centering thing that will then lead to something like self-worth, self-assurance, it's self-love is the starting point of self-worth. And so it's critical to our success, to our peace, right, Megan?
Yep. Yeah. And it's a practice. I remember I've been getting my ass handed to me around self-love for a long time now because I was like, I'm here to love. That's my life purpose. And the universe was like, watch this, hold my beer. Um, so I have for now years I've said in my book, truth is the highest form of love. And so when I think of self-love, whether it's in the context of relationship, whether it's in the context of how I'm working, it's self-love is, am I being truthful to who I actually am in this moment? Meaning, like, am I standing for what I actually feel? Am I standing for what I actually know? Am I standing for what I actually need rather than, especially as an intuitive, I can be very attuned to what other people want and need and see and whatever. And so it's super uncomfortable to practice self-love. I've changed my career a million times. I've left a marriage. I've like all the things. But that's what I feel called to offer around like what self-love feels like in my life as a practice on maybe that's the more grand scale thing. It's like living truth in an actual real way, not conceptual.
For sure.
Yeah.
Like it's so hard when we're being and I know both of you can feel into this, but like when you start to wake up to all the places where you've given away your power and you begin to reclaim that power in some kind of way, either through like no, just do the word no. It's like that's the first word we usually have to learn, right? Like it's like, but self-love is an active practice of reclaiming power, right? It's like calling it back. I'm not people pleasing over here. I'm not showing up small over here. I'm not, like, and it requires, so I have a lot of things about me that are very people pleasing. I have a lot of Libra, if you know astrology, in my chart. And it's like, I'm extra Libra, right? Which is like the shadow of that is very people pleasing. And so when I first started to, like I didn't even know I was people pleasing, right? Like, but people pleasing is an act of self-betrayal, and claiming it back is self-love, right? Like it's like even my husband and I, which, like probably throughout time we'll talk about it quite a bit, but we had to go through a period of time where I literally moved out for a year, not for us to be divorced, but for me to just make enough space in my life to know who I was, to fall in love with me. And it was really interesting because as traumatic as it was to both of us, one of the things my husband says through all of that was that he was able to fall in love with himself again. We've been together since we were 19. So like who we are is very different than who we were then. And like having that space to fall in love with ourselves, to reclaim our powers, to see where we were leaking our power out was really powerful.
So I think both of you are farther down this journey than I am. And I think a lot of our listeners maybe haven't even started the journey. And so I would love to talk a little bit about really taking some action into how to start to find self-love, because forever I was like, oh, that's selfish. Oh, that's selfish, because the people pleaser in me. And I love what you just said. People pleasing is an act of self-betrayal. It took me turning 40 before I thought that, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I got to give and give and give and give, so all the people around me can be great. And now I'm finding that I can actually take care of myself and say no. And people respond positively. Like literally people are like respecting me more. It's really magical, but it took 40 years. So to back up, what can women do to really start to navigate this journey of self-love and not feel guilty? Big question.
Well, first they can join the sweet spot, but I have another thing to say about that. So I think something to name is that, people throw the word codependency around a lot right now, but it's important to acknowledge that women are trained, conditioned to be codependent, to put the needs of other people first. We are taught to feel our sense of value through doing that. And then codependency becomes an addiction. So like part of what we have to do in order to come back to ourselves and not be addicted to finding our value through being who others need us to be, but to reroute that sense of value to, I am confident, I am valuable, the more I root into who I actually am, like the capital S self. And part of it, I think we've already discussed or nodded to is creating space, right? The momentum of our old patterns don't leave us much space to reflect on who we actually are, especially when we have this sort of like addictive pattern to orient out. And so that coloring, that's why we focus so much on nervous system regulation. That's why we, in our sweet spot stuff, we talk about tools to get the body into more still, reflective, spacious places, because that's when we can know what we need to know. But it's not a 5-step process to know who you are. You have to stop long enough and cringe long enough to let that often inconvenient truth. Like, y'all, I have wished so many times I wasn't on this path, because truth and self-love is so inconvenient. It is so inconvenient. It's magical. It is expansive. It's beautiful. But those parts and pieces that are used to the old way really fight, and it feels like truth. It feels like, well, I could never do that. I can't do that. That just is selfish. There's this unquestioning. And without space, we can't question.
Well, I heard Laura say she moved out for a year. I'm like, no, nobody can move out for a year. Like,
absolutely.
That is absolutely not an option for a lot of people. It was a desperate attempt for someone who had pretty much disempowered most of their life through just, what do you need? The question of what do you need, and it was just like, not everybody can do that. It's a drastic moment, and not everybody can survive that. My husband and I did, right? Like, it's like, we had to have a lot of work in that. But I think I think either way, understanding that space or spaciousness, like the difference between a nervous system that can respond to something versus a nervous system that's only in reactive mode.
Yes.
And when you are not, when you don't have enough space from your thoughts, from your emotions, from your interactions, from your work, from your kids, from your relationships, you are only in reactive mode, right? You are constantly reacting to what needs to happen. And so, we talked a lot actually in the month of January. We talked about getting still, finding rest, right? Like, because it is the first step in self-love is you've made enough space for you,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't you if you don't have space for you, you can't love you. And you obviously don't value you enough to make that space yet, right? Like, so it's like it's kind of a both and. You can't really have self-love without rest and space and like the time to be like, who am I? What do I value? What do I want? Right? Like if you're not slowing down and asking that question. So it really is about the first step, like you're saying, Hannah, is like, yeah, maybe mine was drastic. And it was like, I'm trying not to get divorced and leave my husband, but the only way I know to do that is to move out. So that I might do things in a way like that. Just saying, like that might be kind of me to be like big and over the top. But like the first step, I think, in any journey towards self-love is nervous system regulation, right? Like enough space that you can come out of the fight or flight response. And when we say nervous system regulation, this is what we mean. Your nervous system regulates your fight or flight response, which gets you in that stress mode, versus what we call rest and digest, a time in which your body heals, right? Like the cells heal, you digest your food well, right? All these things, your hormones recalculate, right? Like everything comes back into balance. And so if you don't give yourself one of the things that I know about working women is the first thing they will cut out is sleep. They will stay up later, right? They will get up earlier, trying to do more for other people, usually not even about themselves, right? So it's like you need to sleep. You need to sleep so that your body can like find that space. If you can't make it with some breath work or some other things that we might talk about, like just sleeping, just committing to sleeping is a huge step for most women. Like I mean, I know a lot of working women who do not sleep more than 6 hours a night, like, and that's if they're regulated,
Yeah.
in the working world. So I think
It,
that's
it sounds so foundational, yet it's so important.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like our bodies can't really function without it, but boy, we will sacrifice it, right? Like,
Mhm.
And that's
and
supported, right? Like, I mean, we talk about
Yeah.
caffeine culture, right? Like you pursue success by betraying your body. Like,
Mhm.
don't
Mhm.
rest, have another cup of coffee. Don't nourish your body, restrict it. Whatever the things are, these like twisted definitions of it's sort of like these ideas were sold as this magical solution to feeling better. But if the path feels shitty to pursue it, then it's probably not the destination you actually want. And it's probably not a loving path.
No,
But
but
it's
I think
alluring.
there's something to be said for the culture that is like, if we can keep you moving quickly, and then you don't have time to question whether or not you should be serving us, right? Like
Mhm.
in some kind of way, right? So it's like there is something to be said there for like not giving you any space to question. And that's a lot of what it's based on, right? Like we don't want you questioning it, so we're going to keep you pretty in a reactive state, because if you got responsive and challenged the patriarchy, oh God, like what might happen. So
Yeah. And I think I just want to name, because I've worked with a lot of women, and I was a woman who had I have, but was an actively practicing psychotherapist. And I was still waiting for self-love and self-confidence and ease to fall into my lap while sitting on the couch. Like
yeah.
I bought into it in theory. Yes, self-love for sure. But I wasn't, until I started surveying my life and asking, did my choices reflect loving myself? I wasn't able to see that I was saying I wanted a thing that I wasn't investing in. I wasn't actively choosing. So it's this weird disconnect that I see so much with women of like, of course I'm confident. I do this, this, and this. Of course I love myself. I, went to the spa, like you said, but
Yeah.
if you're not making, I mean, almost every woman I've worked with, when I say, I challenge you, I lovingly challenge you to sit down for 15 minutes and only do what you want to do. I have never had a woman go, that sounds amazing. They're like, I don't know that I have time. Maybe twice a week, maybe. And I'm like, y'all, I've been there, but if you don't love yourself enough for 15 minutes a day, then how are you expecting the world to love up on you? Because you're giving the message, you don't need that much love.
I was on a call yesterday and the coach was like, if you don't have time to journal, just start with 2 minutes, 2 minutes every morning. And the people were like, oh, no, I don't, I'm like, yo, it's 2 minutes. And then that really does start to become addictive if you really settle for 2 minutes and start to write. I've noticed, and I only do it for 10,
Yeah.
which feels like a long time. But so often when I'm journaling in the morning, I feel like my hand is not part of me. Like things come on the page where I'm like, oh, wow. Like it's free. It doesn't take a lot of time. Yes, maybe you need to wake up 2 or 10 minutes early, but I think we talk about nervous system regulation. I didn't even know that was a thing a year ago.
Yeah.
And now I hear it everywhere, go figure. But really, really simple things like journaling can start to regulate your nervous system. And moving out really does help. But there's just
Yeah.
I think as someone who was in a reactive and is still, there are parts of me that are reactive for sure, but was in a reactive day-to-day life. Now not being in it, I realize how overwhelmed I felt in the process of getting out of it.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is figure out how we can make it easier for women to recognize that it's not that far away, but you have to be purposeful in what you're doing to create that space. And it might start with 2 minutes.
What we're doing, with our work with the sweet spot, because we are really trying, and I think we're going to be annoyingly so focused on this, that Laura and I have both learned on our own paths that it's the incremental commitments, right? Like it's you saying 10 minutes a day, or like your coach suggesting 2 minutes. It's not about I call it's the non-sexy growth, right? Like it's not, oh, I had this big awakening and my life is so different. It's choosing, okay, for 2 minutes at noon every day, I breathe. That's what changes life drastically. And I think most people, I don't know if they just have never heard of that as a thing that can have this beautiful effect, or they're too busy in the can'ts and the shan'ts and the busyness, but it's, it can be easy. That's why we do it the way we do, like 5 minutes. You are worth 5 minutes.
That's it.
You're worth way more.
Well, yeah. Laura said something, we find our value through who others need us to be. And I recognized this recently when I was introducing myself at a speaking thing. I said, I'm this, all these titles. And afterwards, somebody said, do you realize when you say all your titles, you're naming everyone you serve?
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that like mom, CEO, power, like all these things. I'm like, that's literally how I'm introducing myself to people. Hi, I'm Hannah, and these are the people I serve.
Yep.
But how
That's
else
what we're
am I
taught.
supposed to introduce myself? But I think it's interesting. Like that's the narrative I'm putting out there, and the one I'm hearing for myself. Like I'm still in a space where I find value through who I am to others.
For sure. And I love the idea of imagining women stepping up to a podium and saying, I meditate for 10 minutes before I talk to any other humans. I take the last week of the month off. I make sure I spend at least one evening a week with my best friend. Like I would love for that to be seen as something that is normalized and not judged.
Well, and how inspiring is that intro?
Right?
I'll be like, hell, I want that. I want to be her.
Yeah.
I
It
love
goes
that.
back to the difference between confusing what we do with who we are. Right. So it's like, that's my job is what I do. That isn't who I am. I also do momming, but that doesn't make that be who I am. Right. Like in my world, I would say I'm an infinite being of love and light. I'm here on this playful journey with all sorts of things going on. Right. Like that is who I be. And then what I do is the candy shop, and I do embodied leadership, and I I do human design and I learn. That's pretty much what I do all the time. So it's like just being sure, like what would it take to be so secure in who you are that you stepped up to that podium and you were like, you named who you be and not what you do, right? Like that's a really powerful moment in any woman's life, right? Like
Mhm.
I want to do that. Step up there. I'm Hannah. I color.
Yes.
I would love to see you do that. And I would love for you to chart like what the reaction was,
Yeah.
especially something kind of big and corporate. Like, when they're like, Hannah, what do you do? And you're like,
And
color."
I imagine though the room would be drawn in.
Yes.
Like, wait, what?
I
'Cause
mean,
it's
we're
such a
crafting our
pattern interrupt.
introduction for our next event. You know this, right?
Wait, what?
Our next
Right.
event, this is how we'll introduce ourselves clearly,
Oh,
right?
yeah, we have to, yeah.
This is
Okay.
Hannah. She colors.
I got to find more to do before our next event.
No, you don't. It's not
No,
doing
that's the point. You're right. You're right. I sleep 8 hours a night and I color and I play with my kids and I eat cake with my coffee.
and I
Oh,
prioritize my journaling time, right? Like,
I love this. I love this. Okay,
Mhm.
we're all over the place. I think it still is self-love is all encompassing. So everything we're talking about is still related to self-love. But I want to, I want to go back to what Megan said too about do my choices reflect loving myself?
yeah.
That hit me because
Yeah.
I think I am being really purposeful. But then when I think about what I've already done today, I'm like, I had 4 cappuccinos, or maybe 2.5, but whatever, it's too many.
I haven't had any.
Yeah.
Well, well, and I think that's where part of self-love is forgiveness, right? Because guilt and shame are not self-love. We all do it, but that's where, you have the practice at the end of the day of lovingly reflecting on your experience as a human that day and going, okay, how loving did that feel? And now going into the next day, what do I want for myself? What's my greatest wish for myself as I navigate my tomorrow? And it might be like, I'm going to think twice before I get that fully caffeinated latte, right? Like I love coffee. And that's part of the way I love myself is like, I know my nervous system has a lot of natural caffeine. I don't need it, and I'm like, decaf, please. Right? It's the little things. Or
Yeah.
saying, I am cooked on extroverting. I love you deeply. Like to my husband, I love you deeply. I'm going to read my fairy novel. I need time for me. And building relationships and expectations. I think that's a different thing. Because if you're used to being an overgiver, people expect you to be that. So there's this like wonky time of recalibrating others' expectations for you too. And that's a really loving, messy process. So that, like my son knows. I'll say, babe, I need 10 minutes after we get in the house before you ask me for a thing or approach me about anything. I'm going to reset so that I can be fully present, right? Like stuff like that.
Yeah. I love that. And that's just communicating. That's a whole nother can of worms.
But you have to
setting
know
the-
what you need first.
Yeah. Well, so you have to get quiet, listen to yourself, and then figure out what you need. You're right.
Otherwise, we're kind of assholes, right? Like
Mhm.
I don't like who I am when I'm not listening to myself and having an edge with people I care deeply about. Even if
No,
it's just energetic, just like, ugh, I don't like
Yeah.
that.
I love self-love is forgiveness. I've not thought of it that way. I remember, so I got to coach with Megan one-on-one about a year ago, or I don't know, 6 months ago. And in one of those sessions, you said, fuck a should. And I have thought of that so many times because I all the time am like, oh, I should do this. I should do that. And then if I don't, I carry guilt around it when in fact, I should forgive myself because I shouldn't be shoulding myself. I don't
The
know.
heart
I
doesn't
hadn't thought
should.
of what?
The heart doesn't should. The heart desires. So if it's a should,
Oh.
it's not from the heart.
Mhm.
If it's a should, it's from out there.
Yeah.
From your
Heart
lineage,
has
from your
a desire.
family, from your workplace. Like the heart just goes, ooh, that. So, when I am doing something, like when I step in with a client, there is not an ounce of should there because I'm doing what my heart wants to do.
Mhm.
I've had many things I've done for my work that were not of the heart, like pretty much every bit of technology.
Mhm.
No, everybody needs to write that down. The heart doesn't should, the heart desires.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. Like
And then we
unfiltered.
like the heart desires something, and then we immediately go into the shoulds of why we can't have it, right? Like the couldn't, right? Which is the other side of shoulding.
Yeah.
And then why we couldn't, then because I should be doing something else, right? I should be doing what someone wants me to be doing instead of what my heart really wants and desires, right? Like we are going to talk about desire definitely in the sweet spot at some point, but I mean, we are very deprogrammed from following desire. Like we come out and we're put into a school system, we're put into an industrial revolution that says desire has no place here, right? So it's
Be
like,
productive.
yeah, be productive. So that's shifting. We're shifting, like, but I mean, I think you're right, Hannah. Anytime you can, we joke, Megan and I joke about getting your should shit shovels. Like, I'm ready to shovel that should shit right out of here, right? Like it has no place in my heart. It has no place in my system. I'm not here to should myself or guilt myself into relationship or into my career or into anything else, right? Like I'm here to acknowledge where I feel like I should, right? Like, but bringing a shit ton of compassion to that moment, like, because it's guilt, right? And what guilt needs is forgiveness and compassion. And, again, compassion is a tool of self-love. Like, can I compassionately be with how I made decisions before? And how do I want to change how I value that decision going forward, right? Like it's little baby steps of what if we spent one day, like the challenge would be one day you had to love yourself the way that you have taken care of other people all day long. Like, what would your life be like that day? Just the way you would have taken care of someone else is the way you just took care of yourself, right? Like, that's a powerful day.
Be like a Kardashian. I'm like, wow, yeah, this is the best life ever. I've never thought of it from that perspective because I do so much, well, especially as a mom, but that would, I like that concept.
I have to share because I think what you just said, Laura, made me think of what you all did for my birthday a year and a half ago about. So I had this whole thing, the people who I hold most dear, I talked with them about how like I'm coming into my queenness, which queens are just living purpose from the heart, right? It's not necessarily the diva, but like powerful heart-centered leadership. And my core group of people created a whole day from about 8:30 in the morning until probably 8:30 at night, where my only job was to receive. It's going to make me teary talking about it. I did not plan anything. I did not do anything, but they wanted me to feel in my body what it felt like to receive some of what I give. So like they dropped me off at the spa, they had breakfast, they had my coffee, they did this beautiful ceremony, right? Like I'm usually the ritual holder. They did that for me. Then they took me out for dinner and drinks. It was just like all of the ways that I love to love my people, they gave it back. And it was hard. Like I tried to prepare myself for weeks before it happened because I was like, oh shit, I don't know if I can receive it. And these were people who were just like asking me to receive it. It was coming at me. And I'm like, I've done decades of work and that still was so hard for me. So I think we also need friends, I think Laura and I've had conversations with you too. And like, oh no, you get to be exactly where you are. No need to do anything for us right now. We need to build relationships like that where we create our own culture of expectations and we invite people to receive.
Yeah. And we need a month. You guys probably already have it planned on receiving.
Oh,
because, my gosh. Like,
we're working with it this month in self-love.
Okay.
There's definitely a component of that, but we actually need like a year on receiving. So we're going to weave that into a lot because women are taught culturally to have a strong allergy to receiving.
Well, you can't.
I got it. I'm good. I'm good.
Receive with the nervous system that's in reactive mode. You can't.
Yeah.
It's not open.
So to teach you how to like decompress the nervous system, you can't receive. It's not possible.
Yep.
So first steps, baby steps.
Yeah. Well, and that's what we need to start with. So I want to like tie a bow on all the things I do feel like there are a lot of baby steps in here, and that's exactly what we need, right? Like it is as we work towards creating more ease in our life, it does need to be simplified. So I love like get more sleep, journal 2 minutes, watch
your caffeine. Yeah.
Breathe. I mean, breath is also free,
Yeah.
and it will reset the nervous system. Like, go into the bathroom if you're at work and take 4 deep breaths. Unless it smells bad, go somewhere else. But like, go somewhere where you can get a good deep breath and just take 3 and watch how your whole interaction changes. Like, breath is free. Use it. I mean, for right now, oxygen's still free.
For
You should
now.
use it.
And consider how many days you've gone through where you haven't recognized that you had a breath or that you are breathing, right? Like as you were saying it, I was like, I haven't had a breath this week. It's Friday.
Yeah.
And I did it while you were saying it. I was like, oh, I like this.
Changes
Yeah.
everything. Just
Yeah.
3 deep breaths changes everything in your body.
Yeah.
You actually put yourself into a responsive mode without having to like mentally control a situation.
Wow.
But and even though we have all this research, and if you ask even the common public, they've heard of breath work, they've heard of meditation, right? But no one practices their breath. No one, and really in the United States, there's a lot of people that don't practice meditation either, right? Like, we just don't have time for it. We just think we don't have time for it. We're conditioned to believe we don't have time. But even if you don't have time to meditate, and the old adage in Chinese medicine is if you don't have time to meditate, you need to meditate for an hour.
Yeah.
But it's like even if I don't have time for that, like, this shit is happening right now. It's a now time. Your breath is an amazing way to get yourself above the water instead of just like swimming in it, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm responsive. I am guiding this ship. I'm not going down with it, right? Like, it's a different place to be.
I love that. So many people are reactive and not guiding their ship.
Well,
The whole world would be different if everybody used their breath.
Well, that's true.
yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting is anxiety is the thing tugging the strings at this fast pace, kind of running from ourselves thing. And we try to fix anxiety with the mind, which is what caused it many times in the first place to some extent. And I had somebody when I was getting my somatic training years ago who said, anxiety literally cannot exist in the body with an excess of oxygen. And I was like,
Yep.
oh, well, if anxiety just wants a sense of control, and that gives me a sense of control where I can go, oh, I can control my body in a helpful way. That clicked something for me. It wasn't like breath for meditation, for funsies. It was like, oh, if I go and breathe 3 breaths, my body literally can't do that thing that is so uncomfortable. And I think that's important to know too.
Yeah.
Pull more oxygen into the body, it can't maintain that stress response.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, it's again so simple, yet I don't do it. I get in here, sit at my desk, get all wound up, and I don't ever think about taking a breath or 3.
That's the hardest part, is thinking to do it, which is why habits, right?
Mhm.
Well, we
Yeah.
haven't really been trained, right? Like, in some cultures, breath work is conditioned, right? Like, they do breath work through their whole lives. It's how they kind of navigate life, right? But in our culture, we're not really taught to value the self, to love the self first, to take a breath, to be in responsive states. Of course, you haven't thought about it, Hannah. It's like,
Yeah.
nobody really thinks about it until you hear someone say, your breath will change that. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
You know, like, it takes that moment of that aha moment of like, oh, my breath is the thing that regulates my nervous system. I can pay $10,000 for a machine that will do it, a bed that will do it. You know, I can do all this outside stuff, but the thing that the thing that actually activates all that is that you breathe.
Mhm.
You go outside and you take a deep breath. How many times you step outside and naturally it's like, you know, like, it's so powerful to just put your feet on the ground and take a breath. So
I've heard put your bare feet on the ground is really powerful. That's what you mean? Yeah. Of course,
But
I
even
haven't done
you
that.
can't get bare feet because, you know, like, I can just see Megan right now, like, it's all mushy.
It's
you
too
know?
prickly. It's too prickly. I'm too sensitive.
Yeah. But
Give
so
me
you
some moss, please.
your bare feet. Just go be. I mean, definitely your bare feet is a thing, and we will talk about that eventually as a tool, because that's a grounding thing that's really beautiful, and it syncs you back up with some of the rhythms of nature, which are very important to females in general. And we'll do a whole thing on that eventually. But it's like just being outside, letting, like, there's a thing called tree bathing, which is like, just go sit with trees and let it like move the energy in your field. It's kind of powerful shit, right? Just being outside. So that's for another thing too. I know
I was going to say, Laura could say damn near anything, and I'll be like, yeah, sign me up.
Well, and
I'm not really a nature person, if that surprises anyone.
I mean, I
No.
feel you, right?
Oh, gosh.
I also
Okay.
think the one
Oh, go
thing
ahead.
I want to say before we close that's important is you know, what you said, Hannah, is you sit at your desk and you don't take a breath. And it's like, if other people aren't taking a breath around us, it's more likely that we're not going to. So there's also a way of, again, creating enough space, like physical space, walking away to catch your breath, or being the breath for the space. There's many times that's a form of service. I'm like, I'm going to be the most regulated nervous system in this place. I'm going to ground myself because this is bananas. And, you know, like, so it's a both and. If I know that somebody in my life is twirled up, I know I'm very permeable, as all of us are to some extent. I will remove myself so that I can find my center again before I go back. Because if you're around a bunch of stressed out people, you are definitely going to be stressed out. It's how it works. We're entangled.
Yeah.
And there's
personal
forgiveness there too.
responsibility. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's that thing when we say taking personal responsibility. It's not you can change anything about what's going around you. You can take personal responsibility for what you need. That's an act of self-love, right?
Yeah.
Like I take
Yeah.
personal responsibility for what I need right now. I need breath. That is an act of self-love.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to get it. I mean, I have a page full of notes, but one of my favorites is self-love is the starting point of self-worth. I love that.
It's the practice of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When all of us, especially women, need more self-worth.
Yeah.
But we'd have to value ourselves enough to get it, right? And that comes with self-love.
Yeah, my coach often, my business coach, who I just think the world of, and I'm scared to death of, but I'll like say, oh, I did this week, and she'll stop me and be like, hey, be nice to my friend Hannah. Because the way I talk to myself, and I don't even think of myself as someone who really talks down, but I'm just so judgmental and so critical. And I know that's impacting my self-worth. Like she said the other day, and I love this, and I think this about so many people. She said, I wish you could see you the way I see you. And I think that all the time about people in my life that don't think highly of themselves. I'm like, God, if only you could see you how I see you. But I don't think about it about myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, self-love is the starting point of self-worth is big to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing
Thank
1
you.
month focused on it, but it's kind of our whole thing at the candy shop in the sweet spot.
Yeah.
Self-love.
Mhm.
That's true. Okay. So we're back here next month.
We'll be back here next month talking about what will be coming up in March, right? So ultimately right now we're talking about self-love because the theme for February is self-love. So if anybody wants to go deeper, join us in the sweet spot, which you guys can find on our website, candyshopforwomen.com, because I think we're supposed to do all that part at the end of our videos. So I just did it for us, y'all.
The professional part.
The professional part that we sometimes forget because we're so busy in the personal growth side of things. So yeah, the theme is self-love. And even if you're not joining us, definitely hold it. Hold the
Yeah.
vibration of like my relationships, my outside love, my Valentine's is all going to be better when it's based in self-love first.
Yeah. And y'all, I literally had to get a tattoo as a daily reminder. I put it on the left side of my body because that's the receiving side. I knew I needed that direct of a reminder because I'm happy to give, but I forget to receive.
Yep. Yep.
So, you know,
Oh, I love that.
sticky
I'm gonna
notes,
go get a
tattoos,
tattoo.
whatever.
Going to get a tattoo after lunch today. Thanks, Mick.
Okay.
All right. I love you
y'all.
all.
Thanks for being here.
Bye, y'all.